Good morning. It's Monday, March 25, 2024, and we've got 1 week to go until the end of the month. And if I talk about the end of the month, end of March, then a lot of people will resonate with what I'm meaning if I say it's that time of the year. So a lot of us are going to have the responsibility to close off books, prepare tax returns, and submit reports, annual reports. A lot of companies work on different schedules, uh, but for us at Bitgrace Monument, it's the end of the quarter, end of the first quarter, and that means we get to present you the stats for the first quarter of uh, 2024. With that being said, there's a lot of people that's forever asking what are the statistics in farm attacks? What's happening? Uh, Give us details. Everybody wants to know, but what happened in this period, and how does this compare to the same period last year? So I'm going to try and do that for you this morning. I don't have a lot of statistics. I've got a few graphs here. I've highlighted certain things that I believe that is showing trends, and I'm going to see if we can connect the dots with certain trends to things that's been on a lot of people's minds in the past few years. So, without any further ado, let's shoot from the hip and see how it goes. The first graph I have here, you'll see the blue for 2024 and the amber or yellow for 2023 for a total of 37 attacks for the year so far. And for the same period last year, there were 48 attacks. Murders, only three for the year so far, and we can count our blessings in that one. And for the same period last year, there were a total of five murders. You'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, that's the statistics for March, January, February, March 2023, and on the right-hand screen, closer to the camera, you'll see the statistics for 2024 same period. January, 7 attacks without any loss. February, 17 attacks with the loss of 3 people. And for March so far, 13 attacks without any loss for the month. For the same period last year, January 7 for 3, February 22 for 2, and March 11 attacks and 5 murders. During the month of March, I started looking at what is the hourly rate, and I decided to share that with you as well. For January, the rate between attacks was 106.2 hours, and for February, 40.9 hours between each attack, and the probability for March an attack every 44.3 hours. Now, for March, at some point it was 34.5, and for the beginning of March, the first few days, Friday 1st, Saturday 2nd, and Sunday the 3rd of March, there were four attacks, which meant that the spacing between attacks were a mere 18 hours. Now, if you take that for a 24, it's less than 24 hours, so it's an attack each and every day. If you look further on at deeper into the month where it was 34.5, it means that if you have an attack on Monday morning, 6 o'clock, before the sun sets tomorrow afternoon, 6 o'clock, you will have had an attack already. For January 23, for the same period 2023, January also the same 106.2. The probability rate for February 2023 was 30.5, and for March a 67.6 between each attack. Like I already said, and there's the figures for the same period in 2023. If you want to have a look at that, that's what it was like. So it's actually uh, you can say yes, the probability is there, but and you cannot work according to this to say, you know what, this is the amount of attacks we had for the month so far. So we're sitting at, hypothetically speaking, like say for instance February last year, 30.5, an attack every 30.5 hours. So we only need to be vigilant at that point. Vigilance is not about what the probability is for the next attack. Vigilant is vigilance is for everyday use. It's a lifestyle. So in other words, like we had in March, a farmer walks out to go and switch off the generator after load shedding. It comes back into the house and he's confronted with by a guy with a shotgun. So where was his firearm? His firearm was in the house next to the bed. Why not take your firearm with you when uh, uh, when you go out, and when you come back into the house where there's always a probability of a farm attack in South Africa? And Kaliru from Transvaal Agricultural Union, he had it thing, and I'll discuss that with you on Wednesday. But I feel sometimes it's pointless to discuss all these safety measures and safety precautions if attacks still happen, because we are just not in that lifestyle of being vigilant. And I'm not talking about just about farm attacks. I'm talking about your everyday life. If you get out of the car at the shopping mall, do you look around? Do you see possible threats? If you walk into a shop, the other day I was walking into a shop and just browsing around, and there was this lady. She was between a pallet loaded with soft drinks and the fridge. She was browsing the content of a juice, and without her noticing anything, uh, two tangos actually got one behind her and one in front of her, and she didn't even recognize them. And when they saw me looking at them, because I could see yes trouble brewing. When I looked up and they saw me standing still and looking at the situation, they turned around and they left. So how's that for knowing what's happening in your surroundings? You know your farm, you know the layout of your farm, you know exactly where what is. And if we look further on, we're going to see, we're going to look at what is actually noted, what is actually taken during farm attacks. Like I said earlier on, the tendencies that we're working with, um, and how that connects with stuff that has been on our minds, embedded deeply in the back of your head, that's always been bothering us about our society in South Africa, and not just in South Africa, worldwide. So uh, we need to be awake. Uh, uh, we need to take note of our surroundings so that we can at least have a fighting chance. There's so many instances where, in the past 3 months, in the past 6 months, for that matter, where there was an attack on a farm and the farmer just turned around and he fought back and the tangos fled. So it's possible to veer off a farm attack if you are actually taking note of what's going on in your surroundings. In this slide, the targeted items, and it's almost like it's becoming a blueprint for farm attacks. The grey for your cash component, and the amber for firearms. And in January, no cash was taken. One case, one farm attack where there was actually a firearm taken. For February, uh, 5 instances where cash was involved, and 4 instances for firearms. And then for March, 5 attacks where firearms were taken, and 6 attacks where cash was actually taken. Now, there's a lot of focus on firearms. In one case, that was the end of February, that was in East London. Uh, the two gun safes, they couldn't get their hands on the keys for the gun safe, and while they actually tortured the farmer to get the keys out of him and threatening him with a chainsaw to cut him up while he was lying, barely breathing, with his nostrils just above the water, in scalding hot water in a bath. He told him, yeah, go ahead, I don't have the safe's keys. And in the end, they just pulled the safes out of the wall and loaded them on the back of the farmer's cruiser, and off they went. Cash taken on scene is also is the case, is often the case. And in the past few months, we've seen a lot of cases where EFT and e-wallet transfers were forced out of the farmers so that these guys can get away with the cash. Also, They empty your wallet. They take your bank cards, like what happened in the beginning of March. They just took the people's bank cards. Now, before you can actually get to the bank to go and change or stop those cards, they're already withdrawing because they force your PIN out of you and they take whatever they want and they off with that. In this photograph, you can see the red arrow there that indicates that's the rifle safe actually on the back of that cruiser. And just between the rifle safe and the cab, there was a smaller safe. That was the handgun safe that was also chucked on the back of the vehicle and taken off. Fortunately, these guys made one mistake and they were in trouble. So their getaway was fruitless because they couldn't actually get to where they could safely remove everything. Got into an accident. There was a minibus. 16 people got injured in that collision, and that's where the security companies moved in and they detained these guys. Now it's almost becoming a rule of thumb for farm attackers to to go off the premise that a farmer will always have guns. If you consider the intel gathered about what is in your house, it's actually frightening. Now, I want you to imagine one of these old downtown lawyers. He's got this old lady that is sitting. She's doing the reception and she's trying to do a bit of typing. Her fingers are stiff already. She's in the late 70s, but she's still working for him. The lawyer is almost, well, also 60s, 70s, and you picture him behind his desk, and there's all these files stacked all around him. All these active cases that's already been concluded, and where the files are still on that corner of the table. Now there's all these stacks, and he's barely got space to work with, but he knows exactly where each and every file is. And that's how I personally picture uh, the intel that is gathered about what's going on in a farm. Uh, the the intelligence gatherer and sometimes somebody in your house, they know exactly, and that's as if they almost draw a map of where everything is in your house, where the safe is, where the keys are, what the content of the safe is. Uh, are you forever on your laptop sitting working with banking details? Your farm workers probably get some EFT, so they know that you've got access to a bank. You don't have to drive all the way to town to go and draw money and to pay them cash. Um, we have a lot of firearms in our safe, like for instance, the guy in Melmoth. I'm not going to mention his name right now. That's for the end of the month. He had his 9mm next to the bed, but he also had in his gun safe there were several firearms which these tangos took. Um, but and like I said, we can emphasize safety measures at nausea, but if your firearm is not on your hip or on the small of your back, it's not going to do you any good. The greater plan is to rob farmers of these so that they are unable to defend themselves in future situations. One can always also accept that such stolen firearms are likely to be employed in future attacks. If you look at this attack by type, uh, for January, only two cases where firearms featured prominently. For February, out of the 17 cases, 8 cases where firearms were actually confirmed to have been used, and then for March, 7 times. Unknown circumstances for February, or for January, there were one, for February, there were four, and then March, only two. And then we move over to blunt objects. For January, there were 2 cases, February, 3 cases, and for March, 2 cases. Sharp objects for January, two, and for March, and also two, for February, none that was confirmed. I think that would probably, that zero would probably mean that it's cancelled out or sort of replaced by the use of firearms. And like I say, firearms are being used in a lot and sometimes include victims being shot, whether on purpose or sometimes by accident. There was a case where a woman was running to the aid of her aging mother, and while she shoved the attacker aside, She actually got hit in the leg accidentally. We even had a previous case that was last year in Balmoral with the murder of Charles Extian. Apologies for the dog in the background. He is quite active and quite noisy. But like I said, the fleeing attackers, one of the attackers actually shot himself by accident, and while he was on the road bleeding, the police detained him, and he was taken to the hospital and remained under detention in the hospital. I think bloodlust has got a lot to do with it. We see a lot of farm attack scenes where it's actually a bloodbath. It's horrendous to imagine or to see the amount of blood on such a scene. Uh, there's a lot of attempts, a lot of attacks that one of the purposes are to draw blood. It's almost like a primitive type of attack. And there were cases. There was uh, in February, there was a case in Camildrift West. It's either February or January, where three people, husband and wife and their son, they were admitted to hospital because of stabbings. They were stabbing, and their condition was actually serious. They were in hospital quite a few days and they were patched up quite well, they were hurt quite badly, but yeah, they actually made it, and eventually they were released from hospital. During 2023, there were a lot of cases of throats being slit. I know uh, the Becker family in Grootvlei, I think it's Uncle Charles, his throat was slit. His wife was very badly hurt as well. She was hospitalized, and then there's also an attack, and I'm not going to say which attack it is, but the one version of the attack that was one of the victims were actually decapitated. Now you don't just decapitate somebody; you must really know what to do because there's a lot of things. Uh, that you need to make sure that it's been severed before the head can actually come apart from the body. In a lot of cases, blunt objects, um, and like I said, the cases for blunt objects, two of them for January and March each, and no, apologies for that. Um, the blunt objects were two in January, three in February, and two in March. Apologies for that. I'm looking at the screen and not at my notes. Uh, And in cases like these, there were cases of knobkieries, even a case of one guy that got hit by a brick because he moved out of his house 3 o'clock in the morning to go and investigate what's going on outside. He was totally unarmed. One of his attackers hit him with a brick and he started screaming. And when he started screaming, somebody actually fired the shots and the tangos ran. There was a case where four people that those were the four elderly people in the George area. They were actually attacked with a guala. Now, for those of you, guala is like sort of slang for something that we use, especially when in South Africa when we do fencing to get the hole deep enough for a fence post to be sunk. Uh, in a lot of other countries, I think the soil is much softer. It depends on the soil type, and sometimes it's necessary to use this guala. Guala is it's a longish piece of metal. It's a metal bar. As you can get them sometimes up to about 1.5 meters, and with a sharp point at the one end, and then blunt at the other side, normally hexagonal in shape, and thickness varies between 1 inch, maybe 2 inches, and tapering off towards the bottom where the sharp point is. That's what we say is a guala. It's this heavy piece of metal. Now, I don't want to be hit with a guala because I know that thing can sustain a lot of damage. But that's the stuff that these guys use. It's primitive for them. It's as if they just want to kill and maim, and that's the MO for farm murders in South Africa. And then finally, almost always, victims are tied up. They use anything they can get. They will use twine if it's possible, but mostly they're using wire. And it's also in the farm attack markers that is always when they indicate which farm or what a farm what the activity should be at the farm. They almost always indicate just a small coil of wire indicating that the people must be tied down. We had one case now in March. The people were tied down with barbed wire, and I'm not talking about dennet wire, the stuff that you get on top of your fences. I'm actually talking about the actual wire that's being used for fences, which is uh, twisted wire with just a nudge of sharp points, and just to deter uh, anybody that wants to get close or wants to come through the wires. So that's what they used for this. I'm not going to say the case either because case specific stuff is for the end of the month when we do that video. That should be month in is in about, I think that's next Monday, the 31st, and then straight about a week after that, we will entertain you with the monthly statistics. In 2018-29 fiscal year, 9,600 firearms were stolen and only 7,500 were actually recovered. In South Africa, firearms control is driven by Act 60 of 2000, and that determines the everything about firearms, your licensing processes, who may acquire a firearm, your competencies that is covered, that everything. So I believe uh, anywhere else, I think in the States, the gun control is not that strict. I'm talking under correction. I'm not staying in the States. I'm not knowledgeable about the gun laws in the US. But I think it's easier for you to attain a gun in the US than it is for you to get it in South Africa. In 2020, there were amnesty offered and some 2,000 illegal and unlicensed firearms were handed over for destruction. Now, there was a very optimistic individual, I'm not going to say his surname, I might just blush, but he decided to start selling off these firearms that was handed back. And yeah, eventually the law caught up with him and he had to also answer a few questions. In 2018 already, Gun Free South Africa promoted the surrendering of legal firearms. Now, who in his right mind, after you've been through that process of getting your firearm license, who in his right mind would actually take his legal firearm and hand it in for destruction? And it's not always, while there's a whole lot of forms that needs to be filled in for the destruction of a firearm, who says this firearm is actually going to be destroyed in this process? What is the validity of that? Can we still believe that this is going to be the case? Now, if you look at this, gun control in South Africa and the promotion of surrendering of legal firearms, and you look at what I've just told you about one of the focal points are for the last 3 months in farm attacks, then you start balancing things and say, but isn't that uh, uh, a greater plan of the drivers of farmer tax to actually disarm farmers so that they are not able to defend themselves? Think about that. Now, my punchline in this one, I'm going to ask you, disarmament of citizens. Now, if you know your history, you know that the surrendering of firearms were often followed by the oppression of that specific society or community. Let that sink in. Now, I think there's a discrepancy here, and hopefully the guys that's knowledgeable about this aspect will correct me gently. On the screen it says expropriation bill 25, but my note says expropriation without compensation bill 23 of 2020. Now, it's merely a review of Act 63 of 1975. So you see how far expropriation in South Africa comes along, even as far back as 1975. Now, the main objective of this bill is to ensure that, apologies, that expropriation laws are in in line with the Constitution of South Africa. Now, this bill clearly outlines how expropriation can be done and on what basis. The bill will assist all organs of state, including local municipalities, who provide services to vulnerable groups, including women, children, youth, and people with disability. Now, I'm reading from the screen on the side. If you see, I'm looking towards this side. So if I read on, you will see where the first buzzword is going to come in. Local, provincial, and national authorities will use this legislation to expropriate land in the public interest for varied reasons that seek, amongst others, promote inclusivity and access to natural resources. That's your buzzword. The introduction of the Expropriation Bill should not be confused with the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution. The amendment of Section 25 seeks to allow expropriation without compensation, whereas Expropriation Bill seeks to outline how expropriation must be done. In other words, to guide the process and procedures for the expropriation of property by organs of state. While we have a good understanding and good perception already, uh, the question is still asked, who may expropriate? Now, any expropriation authority, as stipulated in chapter 1 of the bill, in other words, an organ of state or a person empowered by this act or any other legislation to acquire property without expropriation. Now, this is, for example, State Department in three spheres, that is national, provincial, and local governments. Courts also have the authority to rule over matters involving expropriation. Ministers may expropriate property for a public purpose or in public interest, and that is stipulated in Chapter 2 of this bill. Now, this bill also stipulates the powers and the limitations for the expropriation authorities in the expropriation of property. Now, this next point, listen well. We say the up top of the limitations uh, and for expropriation. And then the next question is, what may be expropriated? According to the Constitution of South Africa, Section 25 4B, property is not limited to land. Any property that includes movable or immovable property may be expropriated. So, in other words, they can take your car, they can take your house, they can empty your bank account if you look at this correctly. But then also, uh, like it says, that it clearly stipulates the limitations to expropriation. Why may expropriation be done? That's the next question. And it can be done for two purposes. That is for in public interest or for public purpose. Public purpose can be defined as any purpose connected with the administration of the provisions of any law by any organ of the state. Now, it states here a valid reason uh, for purpose, public purpose, would be to expropriate land for the building of a school or the building of a hospital. Public interest. Public interest in terms of Section 25(4)(a) of the Constitution includes the nation's commitment to land reform, to reforms to bring about equitable access to all South Africa's natural resources. Once again, natural resources. Section 25(8) further states that the state might take legislative steps and other measures in order to redress the results of past racial discrimination. In other words, yeah, there will also be always be a racial flavour to this whole thing. And you're asking me where am I going with about where am I going to with this? And like with gun control, the punchline over here is likely areas that is being expropriated, uh, or likely areas that is suffering from frequent farm attacks. I'm not talking a certain area around the town. I'm talking about wider areas, which areas, provincial areas, which is the area that farm attacks are frequently happening. Is that how do you compare that? If you put a blueprint of farm attack areas where it's most likely or more likely for farm attacks to occur, how does that compare to land reform target areas? I'm going to give you an example here. Uh, you have all these maize fields in the eastern parts of South Africa, what we call Mpumalanga, also included is in the north of the Free State. And we also know the northwest of the Free State, there's a lot of gold. That's one of the examples. In the Mpumalanga region, that's one of the eastern provinces of South Africa, so for you that's watching this video abroad, there's a lot of coal. Now, above the coal, there's maize, like we call millie fields. And that's the type of thing that you look at. I mean, I mentioned earlier the murder of Charles Exton in Balmoral last year. Just across the freeway, the freeway that's running from Pretoria towards Maputo in Mozambique. Just across from there is an area called New Lager. There's a power station as well there as well. And there's a lady there, an oldish lady. Her property is valued at 12 million. And last year, sometime a bigger company, one of these mining companies, wanted or offered her 4 million for her property. Now, start balancing the facts and start looking at things critically. Uh, isn't uh, the connection between land reform, farmer tax, and what's underneath the ground? Think about that. This is it from my side with regards to the first quarter statistics and a bit of uh, discussion on the trends and tendencies with regards to that. If you think that there is more that you need to see, more that I need to uh, display to you, more that I need to dissect and draw out of each and every farm attack that we list, please let me know in the comment box, or for those of you that can contact me directly, please do so. You are more than welcome. This is not for my benefit. This is for the benefit of the people out there, so that you know what's going on in South Africa with regards to what my main topic is: farm attacks and murders in South Africa. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank Loving Life TV down in Australia for inviting me to use their platform to display our farm attack and murder videos as well. Thank you so much, Scott and Nat, for facilitating this. We really, really appreciate it, and we are going to make good use of the opportunity that you offer. Also, the various other uh, uh, agencies that's also uh, 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 doing farm attack and murder statistics, with whom I can double check that I've got my statistics right, people that we can share uh, things with, that we can draw information from, the various groups that we are on. Thank you so much for your contribution. I know that I asked for a photograph and somebody sent me a photograph an hour or so later. The photograph is included. That's the photograph of the safe on the back of the cruiser. Thank you so much for that. And also the people around Witkruis Monument, our different committees and groups, especially the statistics group that is helping me compile these statistics. That's forever editing everything that I do, make sure that the spelling mistakes are there. Esther, that's putting in the color codings for each and every attack type, so that we can, for ease of reference at the end of the month. Thank you all, and thank you to everybody that's watching this video. If you've not subscribed, please subscribe, because there are more to come. Like I said in this video, end of the month video is coming next week. So look forward to, stay tuned to have that on your screen as well, so that you can further be enlightened as to what the situation is with regards to farm attacks and murders in South Africa. Enjoy this week. Stay safe. If you're staying on a farm, be vigilant. Make sure you've got your six covered, and always stay strapped. Enjoy your week.